1940s Soviet Russia. 5 political prisoners are locked in a sealed chamber and exposed to an experimental gas designed to eliminate the need for sleep. The scientists promise them freedom if they survive 15 days without sleeping. For the first 5 days, everything seems normal. Then the screaming begins. The subjects stop talking to the researchers. They start tearing pages from books and covering the observation windows with them. By day 9, the screaming stops. When scientists finally open the chamber on day 15, they find a scene of absolute horror. The subjects have mutilated themselves, ripping off chunks of flesh and muscle. They're eating their own bodies, and when offered the chance to leave, they beg to stay in the chamber. They refuse to sleep. This is the Russian sleep experiment, one of the internet's most terrifying stories. But here's the twist: it never happened. Hey everyone, welcome back, SiR.ReapeR here. Today we're doing something different. We're covering a story that millions of people believe is real, that's been shared across the internet for over a decade, and that has absolutely terrified people. But it's not true. It's a creepypasta internet horror fiction. So why am I covering it? Because the Russian sleep experiment has become so famous, so widely believed, that it's become a modern urban legend. And the story itself raises real questions about sleep deprivation, unethical experiments, and how easily fiction can become accepted as fact. Let's break it down. The story was first posted on August 10, 2010, on the creepypasta wiki by a user named Orange Soda, whose real identity is unknown. It's written from the perspective of a scientist working at a covert Soviet research facility in 1947. Here's how the story goes. Soviet researchers developed an experimental stimulant gas that would allow soldiers to stay awake for 30 days straight, without needing sleep, a massive military advantage. To test it, they selected 5 political prisoners and offered them a deal. Survive 15 days in a sealed chamber filled with this gas, and they'd be set free. The 5 subjects were locked in a chamber with enough food, water, books, and a toilet. The room had microphones so researchers could monitor them, and thick glass portholes so they could observe. For the first 5 days, everything went according to plan. The subjects stayed awake, talked normally, and seemed fine. On day 5, they started complaining about the circumstances and events that led to their imprisonment. Their conversations became darker, more paranoid. By day 9, one of them started screaming. Then another. Then all of them were screaming for hours straight, blood-curdling screams of absolute terror and agony. Then suddenly, they stopped talking to the researchers entirely. They tore pages from the books and used them to cover the glass portholes and smear feces on them, blocking all observation. The microphones picked up wet tearing sounds and more screaming, then silence. On day 14, the researchers tested the intercom. They announced that they were opening the chamber to test the microphones and that, if the subjects stepped away from the door, one would be freed. A voice responded from the chamber, saying, "We no longer want to be freed." On day 15, the researchers decided to open the chamber and end the experiment. When they pumped fresh air in and turned off the gas, the subjects went absolutely berserk, screaming and begging for the gas to be turned back on. When they finally opened the door, they found a scene of unimaginable horror. 4 of the subjects were still alive. The 5th had died days earlier, and the others had been eating him. The living subjects had torn open their own abdomens and pulled out chunks of their organs. They had ripped off flesh and muscle, exposing bone. They had bitten off their own fingers. Their wounds weren't bleeding normally. The gas seemed to have some coagulating effect. The subjects were manic, violent, and refused to leave the chamber. They attacked the guards. They laughed and screamed that they wouldn't go back to sleep. The story ends with one of the subjects being asked what they are. The subject responds cryptically about what lurks inside humans when they are not dulled by sleep, implying that sleep protects us from some dark part of ourselves, and that removing sleep unleashes something monstrous. One by one, the subjects die or are killed trying to escape. The final subject tells the researchers that they are the true monsters and that they must continue the experiment on themselves if they want to understand. The story ends ambiguously, leaving readers disturbed and unsettled. So that's the story, and it's absolutely fiction, completely made up. But here's why it became so famous, and why so many people believed it was real. First, it taps into real fears about sleep deprivation. We all know that not sleeping makes you feel terrible. Studies have shown that extreme sleep deprivation can cause hallucinations, paranoia, cognitive impairment, and even psychosis. While the extreme body horror in the story is fictional, the core idea that sleep deprivation messes you up is based in reality. Second, the story is set during the Soviet era, a time when secret, unethical human experiments actually did occur in various countries, including the USSR and the United States. Projects like MKUltra, Uni 731, and various Cold War era research programs have been documented, so the premise of a secret Soviet experiment isn't entirely implausible, which gives the story just enough grounding in reality to seem believable. Third, the story is written in a clinical, documentary-style tone. It reads like a declassified report or a scientist's account, which makes it feel more credible. It's not written like obvious fiction. It's presented as if it were a leaked document or testimony. And finally, it's spread at exactly the right time. In 2010, creepypastas were exploding in popularity. Stories like Slenderman, Jeff the Killer, and the Russian sleep experiment became viral sensations, shared millions of times across forums, YouTube, social media, and more. But despite how realistic it feels, there's zero evidence that the Russian sleep experiment ever happened. No declassified documents, no survivor accounts, no historical records, no mention of it in Soviet archives that have been opened since the fall of the USSR. It's fiction. Multiple fact-checking organizations, including Snopes, have confirmed it's a creepypasta, not a real event. The author, Orange Soda, has never been identified, and they've never claimed it was based on real events. Yet to this day, people continue to debate whether it's real. YouTube videos with millions of views present it as fact. Comment sections are filled with people arguing about its authenticity. Some people genuinely believe it happened. That's the power of a good story. It takes on a life of its own and becomes an urban legend, a modern myth passed around the internet campfire. So why did I cover this if it's fake? Because the Russian sleep experiment is a perfect example of how misinformation spreads, how fiction becomes accepted as fact, how people want to believe in dark secrets and hidden horrors, and also because, even as fiction, it's a genuinely effective horror story that raises interesting questions. What would happen if we never slept? What parts of ourselves do we suppress when we're awake? What would we become if we pushed our minds and bodies beyond their limits? The story also serves as a cautionary tale about the ethics of human experimentation. While this specific experiment never happened, real unethical experiments absolutely have occurred throughout history. The Tuskegee syphilis study, Nazi medical experiments, Japanese Unit 731, these are documented atrocities. So while the Russian sleep experiment is fiction, the horror of unethical human experimentation is very real. The Russian sleep experiment has spawned books, short films, a planned movie adaptation, countless YouTube videos, art, and discussions. It's become part of internet culture. And that's why, even though it's not real, it's worth knowing about, because millions of people think it is real, and understanding the difference between fact and fiction matters. So there you have it. The Russian sleep experiment is a creepypasta, not a real event. But it's one hell of a story, and it's become a modern legend that continues to terrify people over a decade after it was first posted. What do you think? Did you believe it was real before this video? And what does it say about us that we're so ready to believe stories like this? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this breakdown of internet horror fiction versus reality, hit that like button, subscribe for more mysteries and debunking, and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.